For a long time now, myself and my friends who've played MMOs through the decades have been waiting for a new, classical, like old school MMO experience. And the lesson is be careful what you wish for. So, the plan is to do 3 MMO videos in the next month or two. The first one is here now. This is this one. This will be a preview for Ashes of Creation. The second one is more general look at MMOs, where they came from, the big players, how it all developed, and how we got to where we are today. And then the third one will be a video looking at where we are today moving forward. How we might look at MMOs in a year from now, maybe 10 years from now. So, on the 11th of December, 2025, the public finally got their first real access to Ashes of Creation. Before this, you could buy a alpha and a beta access pass, if you will, but it cost over £100. So I think a lot of people who I know were all waiting for this first early access portal to get access to the game. To say the early access launch day for Ashes didn't go very well is a bit of an understatement. But most old MMO players, they know the score. Launch day is very rarely a smooth experience. There are always problems, queue problems, server issues, and Ashes was no exception. The big issue that we came across was, first of all, the website. A lot of new players on Steam had to be directed to the website. They got sent there to link their account to Steam. Fine, no problem. The problem was the website couldn't handle so many people. The website crashed, and that was the bottleneck. Nobody could log in, and for about 8 hours, that was the first big hurdle. Then after that, we had authentication issues, and then after that, there was a queuing issue where people were going into a queue, like myself, waiting in a queue of about 800. It went down very slowly, got to about 50 after 8 hours, and then they restarted all the servers and got booted out of the queue. Fortunately, just after that, I did get in. It was about 2 a.m. I think the Game Awards were just coming to a close, and I got in, created the character, got up in the morning, did my jobs, 9 o'clock, sat down to play, and they had brought down the servers for maintenance. So at the end of the second day, I did actually get in and create a character and start playing, but I'm genuinely worried that they've already lost a lot of players who have tried to get in, lost patience, and just logged off, refunded the game, and that's the last time they'll ever play the game. The cherry on top was that a lot of people who had the launch window open trying to get into the game for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, they've all burned through their 2 hours Steam refund policy, and that's going to really piss people off. So my first impressions of Ashes of Creation is, well, it's complicated. It all starts with CC, doesn't it? Character creation is where you all start, and that was not a good impression for me. I think the characters look very wooden. There are not many options with the faces. The hairstyles, I think you've got 4 per model, which is a really low amount, and some of them look like birds' nests stuck on top of your head. So yeah, not a very good impression overall with the character creation. I'd like to see racial differences, so benefits to, say, elves having better eyesight, that kind of thing. How they implement that, maybe make it more damaging in ranged, I don't know, but they definitely need some more depth there, and I think all that's coming, but for now, the character creation is lacking. I think the general look of the world is good. You've got trees, you've got hills, rolling fields, flowers everywhere, you've got animals running around. The general look is fine, but I think it's once you start to dig under the surface, you start to see issues. So, for example, one of my favourite things to do in a brand new MMO is jump in the nearest body of water. I just love to swim. I think this is probably from my days of swimming across the coast in Warcraft, looking for wrecks and lost ships and things. Once I actually got in a river, I noticed there's a really nice ripple effect on the surface. There's a weird effect where there's a cone of water above each character, but I'm assuming they'll fix that. But then once I actually got underneath the water, it was a very disappointing find. Basically, there's no foliage, no reeds, no fish swimming around, no real water effects at all, apart from an oscillation effect on the floor, on the seabed. So yeah, they've got a lot of work to do in that department. And I know it's a really small thing, but that analogy kind of followed me through the entire game really so far, is that lots of the systems, they look good from a distance, but then once you get close and you get underneath the surface, there's still quite a lot of work to do. So this week, prior to playing Ashes, I actually went back and played a little bit of Guild Wars 2 and a little bit of World of Warcraft. Started a new character in both of them just to get a feel of how both these games get the player into the game and start you off on that process of leveling. Now let's be clear, Guild Wars 2 and Warcraft especially are both finished games and they've been out for a long time, so they've had time to refine their whole system. But I was lucky enough to be an alpha tester for Guild Wars 2, and even back then, before the game was actually finished, the experience of going through them first few levels and the first few hours was very refined and it was very well designed. The game takes you from one area to the next and you feel like it's a really smooth progression. I don't feel that's the case with Ashes. You come out of the starting area, you walk out the first building and you're given a choice of going left or right, depending on which NPC you speak to. And it just felt like it was very spread apart and there wasn't a really good flow to that first few hours for me personally. Now I have seen some open quests like they've got in Guild Wars 2, things where you walk into an area and you're instantly part of a social quest. You don't have to join a group, you don't have to speak to anybody. Just by being there and contributing to the whatever it is, kill these mobs or bring down a boss, you are already being rewarded for that process. And whatever it is that needs to be done, if it gets finished, fine, a reward chest is placed and everyone goes and gets the reward. I thought this was a really good mechanic in Guild Wars 2, and I'm glad they're implementing it into this game. The only issue is, at the moment, it's not working very well, but again, alpha, they've got time to fix it. I hope they do more of them actually. There weren't that many of them spread across the map. So yeah, I hope they add more of these events. In terms of classes, on the surface, it's a very generic list of choices. So for example, you've got cleric, you've got fighter, tank, bard, you've got all these different ones you've played before. And from what I can see, there's not many surprises here, unfortunately. Now, what it does pretty well. So for example, I played a few different classes. I played the cleric, the ranger and the summoner, but then I actually settled on the rogue. Now the rogue is your standard DPS class. You can stealth, you obviously go in with burst damage. There's actually quite a lot of skills that fold into each other, like lacerate and flurry. If you use them properly and look at the bleed effects and follow the advice that the game gives you on each class, it's actually a very well designed system. And I still found this as well with the summoner. A lot of the skills complement each other, and if you use them in the right sequence, you can have a lot of fun. Now what I find very interesting is that around level 25, apparently you'll be able to choose a second profession or second archetype, and that will complement the first one. So for example, you could choose maybe a tank cleric or a ranger with a mage worked in, and that sounds like a very intriguing prospect, and I hope that will add a lot more diversity to the different classes we find on the battlefield. Now, as I've mentioned, I did play Guild Wars 2 for a few days last week, and I did try the new mount system. I played Guild Wars 2 for about 2 years, so I never actually saw the mounts, but I've heard they've done a really good job and they look really good. And I have to say, they are the best mounts I've seen in any MMO ever. A few ran past me in the start area and they're just like, wow, where did you get that mount from? I need that mount. And that's what I was looking forward to with Ashes. Now, there are some good looking mounts in Ashes. I've seen them. There's one that's like an iguana. There's another one that's like a spider. Very cool. But they still don't feel as good to ride as the ones in Guild Wars 2. Those have got like a really bouncy kind of like momentum fueled system under the hood. So they just feel like they're actually heading in the right direction. And when you, for example, you turn in a different direction, the head of the raptor will turn in that direction. And there's a little bit of inertia that goes with it. They just feel really good to ride. I can't say the same for the ones in Ashes, unfortunately, at the moment. Now, they may change this, they may improve it. But right now, they look okay, like I've said, but they feel like you're riding a wooden horse. So I really hope they improve the mounts in that way. I will mention crafting briefly. I wasn't very impressed with this system so far in the game. It feels very placeholder, very generic, and very boring, unfortunately. I think all the crafts they're going to put in the game on 1.0 are in, so leather making, tailoring, cooking, jewel crafting, animal husbandry, which could be interesting, by the way. They're all in place, but it just feels like a very laborious process to get from A to B. Lots of button clicking, lots of necessary menu navigation. I really hope they work on this and refine it. It could be really good, and you know, I do like to craft in games and make my own stuff. If I'm like say an archer, I like to make my own bows and that kind of thing. But at the moment there are lots of problems. For example, gathering hides for one of the first tiers of leather making, the creatures that you get them from, you have to cull them, but the only area you can get them from really is just saturated with players trying to get the same mobs. So that feeds into really one of my other big criticisms of the game. The mobs and the general creature layout needs to be worked on a lot. There are some areas where there's just no creatures at all. It's just like a barren wasteland of trees and rocks. And then in some other areas, there's creatures all over the place. So I know this is alpha, so they've got loads of time to work on this stuff. But right now, everything feels very imbalanced, so that's definitely something to improve. So the one thing this game does have, which not many other games have tried, is a node system. And this is one of the most intriguing parts of the first video I saw, the Kickstarter. So basically, how it works is you go in as a group, you take control of a node, and it starts off as like a couple of tents, and then it evolves through different stages, and eventually goes through all the stages to become like a fully fledged town with vendors, and the people who control the town are the people who get voted in. So a guild will have a leader, and people will vote for that leader to be mayor, and then once that person becomes mayor, they have a certain degree of control over what happens to that town, like what type of town it is, whether it's scientific or whatever. And they even get cool things like the mayor gets his own flying mount, which is actually a really nice feature. I remember when they first announced that Ashes were coming to early access on Steam, I remember being quite surprised. It's been in development now for 9 years, and as a friend pointed out to me, I never really thought about it, but there's a chance that this game might even never come out. Even for an MMO, 9 years is a long time, and considering they're still in alpha, there are warning signs now that this game is in trouble. Now, a lot of people who have been in the closed alpha were up in arms about the fact it was coming to early access, screaming about it's not ready and the game isn't ready for the open public. And I wouldn't say that's the case, actually. I think there is enough game here now for people to get an accurate gauge on whether it's a good game or not, and for them. I think the real question is, have they got enough money and time and energy left to get it over the finish line? There's still a lot of work to do with this game. A lot of the further areas away from the starting area, they're there and they look good from a distance, but once you get there you realise that they've got a lot of work to finish them off. And in the same sense, a lot of the systems, even the ones in place, have lots of refining to do, and I think this game's got another 2 or 3 years of development to get it to where it needs to be. That's my very rough estimate. So it really depends on how things are going inside Intrepid. Stephen Sharif, the main dude, the guy who has funded this game pretty much exclusively, as far as I know, because he's a relatively well-off fella. His vision is coming to life, but like I said, it really does depend on if they now have the resources, the time, and the inclination to get this over the finish line. Now, as far as I can see, everyone's still on board and things are chugging along, but they are taking longer than what they originally thought, and people are getting impatient now. Now, one huge advantage that Intrepid have got is that they're self-publishing this game. So they don't have an EA or Daybreak Studios or an Amazon hanging over the top, like tapping the floor, waiting for results. This is the death knell for many MMOs that have never made it to the finish line, is that the companies that fund and supply the money, they just run out of patience, or they get scared off and get cold feet, and they say put 2-3 years of development money into the game and then just pull the cord and just kill it. This has happened in the last couple of months with 4 MMOs, but thankfully this game doesn't have that problem. These guys are in full control of their destiny, so as long as they've got the money and the time and they can keep chugging along, there's no reason why they can't finish this game. Now, what it'll look like when it is finished, well, that's another question. So there is one other problem this game is going to have to deal with at some point, and that is its pricing model. Now, back in the day when Warcraft was at its peak and other MMOs were coming out, a lot of them had subscriptions. That was the way of doing things back then, and Warcraft could get away with it and still get away with it now. It's the big dog, it's the one that a lot of people still play. But the other MMOs found out quite quickly that there's only so much room for MMOs that charge subscriptions. It's a bit like live services. They found that out now, haven't they, as well? All these live service games coming out, there's only really room in the public consciousness for like 1 or 2, and it's the same with MMO subscriptions. You can't expect people to pay for 5 and 6 at a time. People will just pay for 1. So that's the problem. If they want a subscription to this game, they need a game that is so amazing, so fantastic, it's drawing people in, and people will just pay the sub regardless. They'll just not even think about it because they want to get into the game. Now, I like Ashes, and I've been saying for a long time I hope it does really well, but even with how good it is now, I honestly don't think it's good enough to get people to pay for a sub every month. Maybe the first month, maybe 2 subs, but after that I see a lot of people dropping off and waiting for more content. And if that is the only revenue they're going to be counting on, then I see a real problem for the future of the game. And I worry that they'll have to go to a free-to-play model, funding will drop down, and the content pipeline will get killed off. This, unfortunately, is the negative side of MMO development, is that you are constantly having to feed the animal, feed the beast with new content. That costs money and time, and how do you pay for that? Well, you pay for that with subs. Now, if you don't have subs, then you're looking at an in-game cash shop or pay to win. Now, I think they've said they don't want to do pay to win, but they already do have a cash shop, so maybe that can also start to feed into the revenue stream. So I think I'm coming to the end of my preview, guys, for Ashes of Creation. I think I've said everything I need to say about the preview so far. Do I recommend this game at the moment? If you are a staunch MMO fan and you're desperate looking for another MMO, I think there's enough here to try and see if you like it. But if you're looking for a more finished product right now, I would avoid this for the time being and maybe dive in a couple of months, maybe a year, and see what happens. Maybe wait for the next big update, because right now there are so many things in this game that are not finished, and this is not a complete experience. I do think a lot of people misunderstand what early access means, unfortunately, and you really are going in half baked and supporting the game in its current state, and that is what part of being an MMO alpha and beta tester is all about, is understanding that you're helping craft the game in a way, you're helping the developers get to the end, and that sometimes isn't fun. It's almost like work itself. Like alpha and beta testers are vital to MMO success, and I think you have to understand that before you come in. So there we go, guys, that's my preview for Ashes of Creation. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope it's been helpful in showing you a bit about the game and giving you my honest thoughts on where it is at the moment. I will hopefully do another video in the future as the game progresses and adds more content, and I will do another video on MMOs generally in the new year. But yeah, that's it for Christmas, so I hope you'll have a good break, good Christmas holiday, and well, I'll see you in the new year. Take care, guys. Thanks, bye.